Hi everyone. On Coaches on the Couch today, we are chatting about big provocative thinking with Russell Curtis, who is a director at RCKa. We're also talking about finding joy in a world that maybe is a little dark in places at the moment. And of course, we'll be hearing a bit about his couch. Just before we get into that, a little bit about co-hosts, me, Rachel Birchmore, and Louise Rogers. We're both coaches, so we do exec coaching and team coaching with leaders and emerging leaders. And we also come together to provide leadership development programs through a collaboration called Step Up. So if you want to hear any more about any of that, please drop me an email at rachel@stepuplondon.com. All right, let's get into that conversation now with Russell. Thanks for listening.
Hi, everyone. Welcome back to Coaches on the Couch. I'm Louise.
And I'm Rachel.
And today we're joined by Russell Curtis of RCKa. Hi, Russell. How are you?
I'm good, yes. Good morning. Bit warm.
A little bit warm. Yeah, we are recording this on another record-breaking day. They're coming thick and fast at the moment, aren't they?
Indeed.
And although it's not really couch weather, as we've just mentioned privately, before we get into anything else, we do need to talk about couches. So please, can you tell us something brief and interesting about your couch?
About my couch. I'm going to tell you about my old couch, and which I got rid of a couple of years ago. We bought when my wife and I first got our flat together 20 something years ago. We went to, I think it was Sofa Workshop or something. We bought this black leather couch. It was quite expensive. Well, for us, it was expensive at the time, and it lasted us for decades. It was amazing. It's a black leather thing. I was amazed at how well it lasted. But we decided it was sort of falling to bits, and I need to get rid of it. So what do I do with my couch that I've had in the house for decades, and it's very comfortable but a bit worn out? So we put it on free cycle. Well, nobody's going to want this crappy old couch that's that's this year. And then we had a call, an email almost straight away, and it was from I got to get this right, but it was from a local charity, and they needed it for a children's centre. And they came and took it away and patched it up a bit, and it's got a happy second life.
That's
in a
good.
children's centre in Bath.
Gosh, how
So there we
appropriate.
go. Yes, exactly.
You.
So
Yeah.
circular
Good.
economy. There you go.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Well, it might be a little bit difficult for you to provide us with a photograph about it, but we'll talk about that.
Okay, I'm sure I can find you one. There will be a photo somewhere in the archive from 20 years of
Jolly good.
years of being in my lounge.
So, Russell, you're one of the 3 founding directors of RCKa, alongside Tim Riley and Dieter Kleiner.
That's right.
And the practice describes itself as a people-focused practice of architects, designers, and policymakers with a mission to enhance the lives of 250,000 people by 2030. That really struck me. 2025 was a great year for the practice. RCKa was named Architect of the Year at the AJ Architecture Awards, won NLA's residential category, and received awards for projects including Highgate Newtown Community Centre in Camden. The AJ wrote that RCKa now occupies a distinct and impressive role in British architecture. It combines high-quality architectural design with business model thinking, underpinned by a profound dedication to creating social value, which is quite an accolade.
I'm blushing.
Yeah. It's nice that somebody else said it about you, isn't it? And
Exactly.
the Architects Journal, no less. So if we've interpreted those words correctly, I think it's the business model thinking which is central to our conversation today. The way that you phrase your mission stands out as being quite different. And maybe we could start with you telling us a little bit about that and some of the lives you've improved so far as a practice.
So it's a really interesting one, this, because we grappled with it for a long time. And one of the things that we speak about a lot is the positive outcomes of the buildings that we create. And that's really important to us because we truly believe that the buildings that we design have many opportunities to enhance the lives of the people that live in and use them, and we're really interested in measuring that and understanding how those buildings have a positive impact on the lives and prospects of people that use them. We won a couple of years ago. We won the Architecture Today Buildings That Stand the Test of Time award for a project, one of our early projects at the TNG Youth and Community Centre in Lewisham. And we commissioned Jim Stevenson to go back and do a video of that building 10 years on. And what was really striking about it was the way that the community had sort of adopted that building and taking it on as their own. I mean, there was a really interesting process, because the young people that we worked with at the time, who are now the adults that are running the centre, were fundamentally involved in the design process. They helped us with the co-design. They helped us with, they turned up to the planning application. They went to and presented to the funding board. They were really part, a core part of the team. And to see the way that they've now adopted that building and taken it on is remarkable. So that's something that we try and embed in all of our projects, to sort of measure the impact that it's had, not just immediately, but years or decades on from completion.
Do you think their involvement in the process kind of led to their ownership of the product? See what I mean?
Without doubt. Yeah. And what's really interesting is that you see how much they love the building, and because they had a hand in it. And I think there is a risk that if you don't participate in this, or don't encourage this meaningful engagement with communities and work with the people who are going to ultimately be the beneficiaries of this projects, that it feels like it's been imposed on them a little bit and it's not really theirs. But if you've had some involvement in the gestation of that project, you feel ownership, and you care about it, and you feel passionate about it, and you're invested in it, and that's really apparent. And what's really nice about that particular project is that it's not. I mean, it was designed to be sort of knocked about and robust enough to withstand wear and tear, and the kids have sort of taken that on board. And there's like one end of the building has got this sort of artwork that has been done, which we never anticipated them doing, but actually it's great. And inside, because it's all CLT timber inside, so inside the idea was that you could kind of, if it got marked or scuffed or somebody scored their name on it, you could just sand it down. But actually, you got these lovely moments where the kids have sort of created these artworks and embedded them into the building, which is lovely.
Russell, when we first met, which was quite a long time ago now, you were really active on Twitter, as it was back then, talking about procurement in the main then. And I remember you describing yourself as the grumpy one of the three directors. And you're known for this sort of, these are my words, but big provocative thinking, whether it's procurement as it was back then, or use of golf courses. You've talked a lot about and done work and research around locomotivia on the mapping of the rural railway stations and how, housing and those sorts of things. So, even in this description through this introduction, that thinking has been described as business model thinking, big, provocative, and this is sort of central to what we want to talk about today. I just wonder how you describe that style of thinking. Does that resonate at all?
It does, and I'm still the grumpy one, I think. As I get older, I get even grumpier. But I'm at an age now where I think that there's such obvious problems that we all know about, and they need to be called out, and we need to do something about them. And what I've come to realize, I don't write particularly well. I'm not particularly articulate. I'm okay. I get, you sort of get better at it as you do it more. What I've come to realize is that architects, I think, have a unique opportunity, and I think this is unique, that we are able to speak about and advocate for and articulate big ideas in a way that is comprehensible to ordinary people. I'm not an academic. I've got no academic training other than architectural education. But what I've found is that in thinking about big subjects like the golf courses and the railway stations, these are not particularly novel ideas. They're not ideas that nobody's ever thought about before. But what I've found is that I'm able, I think, to talk about these and visualize them and help present them in ways that ordinary people can understand. And they may agree or disagree with it, but it's intelligible. And I think that's why a lot of the work has received sort of mainstream press coverage, where
Yeah.
there are a lot of academic pieces of work. I mean, there's lots of people have written about building around rural stations before, but it tends to be from an academic or sort of economic point of view, which is, is probably more robust in terms of its thinking, but struggles to break out of academic circles. And I think, and I'm really interested in the fact that, the architects, because we can visualize and because we can present ideas
Yeah.
in a visual way that is, because we're used to speaking to people who are not architects, and we're used to bridging that gap between experts in some areas and ordinary people, and that's really helpful.
I was looking at your website this morning and looking at the amount of research that you've done, and those kind of projects that aren't core to what you do, to make money as a practice. And I was wondering about the time that is spent on researching and how you sort of budget for that and why you chose to make it a priority. Because most practices would say, oh, we're much too busy delivering projects. Not most, that may be a little bit unfair, but a lot of practices would say we're much too busy delivering projects. We haven't got time to do this, that, and the other. Whereas you're very much about doing this, that, and the other, which is the research and the kind of thought leadership stuff. So how do you justify that within the terms of your budget as a practice?
Well, it's really interesting because actually a lot of the work that I've done, the research work that I've done, is in my own time. So I'm very privileged to be in a position where I'm able to just spend my evenings and weekends thinking a lot about this stuff. So I have a very understanding wife who has her own hobbies, and so I do spend a lot, certainly at the early stage, thinking the stuff around the golf course. The golf course project, for example, is where it all started. That was my initial piece, which was a lockdown project, and I started that really as an exercise to understand if I could even do it, to teach myself the mapping software, teach myself how to do the research thing. And that then, even though it was a piece of work that I was working on independently and just out of intellectual interest, it then became something that the practice could then adopt and run with. And we've now been commissioned to look at a number of golf courses, for example, and master plans. So it's generated work for the business. Likewise, the railway station projects. That was all something that I'd started just because I was interested in it. And then we were approached by a number of developers, and we invested as a practice of RCKa, invested in putting the Locomatopia idea together and putting some meat on the bones. And that's generated work for the business. So
That's new business development.
It's new business development. Yeah, but it's really, I'm in a really lucky position to be able to enjoy. I enjoy doing that, thinking about stuff. And then it then feeds through to opportunities for the practice. But I think what's really interesting about this is that, and what fascinates me, and I'm doing more and more work in the earlier stages. So writing planning policy, for example, and all of that high level strategic thinking is part of what architects should be doing.
Yeah.
I just don't get the idea that somebody rings you up and says, oh, well, I want a new house, and and you do a beautiful design, and then you hand over the keys at the end of it, or get to practical completion and then walk away. And what we're interested in as a practice is all the bits either side of that. Building project, the design to construction is actually quite a short space, but quite short a period of time in the grand scheme of things. There's all the stuff that comes before and all the stuff that comes after, and those are really interesting. And that's where I think architects have an opportunity to influence, but we don't often enough exploit those opportunities.
Can you trace this back, Russell, to way back to sort of that instinct to challenge and think in that kind of way?
I really can't. That's a very interesting question. I never thought I would be in this position. Thing is, I don't know that I'm a particularly good architect. I'm not that. I don't think I'm that strong a designer. Certainly, there's far more talented people than I am in the office. I've always been a bit of a geek. So I've always been interested in systems, and I can do a bit of programming, and I found teaching myself the mapping software, the GIS software, quite easy. So there are lots of things that I'd had peripheral skills that I was able to call upon. And having found myself in a position where these ideas came forward and was able to sort of find that I could talk about them articulately and talk about them in a convincing way, I think suddenly I settled it. I realized that actually this was the thing I'm good at. This is the thing I enjoy. And so I can't really look back and think in my career over the nearly 20 years that the practice has been going that I've arrived. This was some grand plan. It's just I've found my niche a little bit, found my lane.
And in terms of your two business partners, how do you say? I mean, you've said you're not a very good writer. I'm not sure about that because I've read some of your stuff. You're not a very good speaker. You're not a very good designer.
Well,
so how does it work out with the three?
No, well, maybe I should caveat. I think I probably get there in the end. I don't find writing very easy, but I usually get there in the end. Okay, so that's it. But I'm sure lots of people, professional writers, find that it's quite difficult to get, to make progress, but you get there in the end. So I think what works quite well in the practice is that we all know now we're all of that age where we know what our strengths and weaknesses are. And as it happens, and again, this wasn't planned, but as it happens, we've fallen into or settled into, not fallen into, settled into an understanding about what we're good at and what we're not good at, and it works well. So I'm not the I'm interested in the front end, at the very front end stuff, the policy and the research. We have one of our directors is very, very good at strategic design, and the other is excellent at detail. Is the detail, and so actually that together, that's built. That's allowed us to not tread on each other's toes, but also recognise what we're good at, and build up a broad portfolio across different sectors.
What happens in the rest, sort of in the wider team? How do you make sure that you replicate that, not the same strengths, but the same diversity of strengths as you actually recruit and develop people further through the practice?
I think what's happened is that we do get approached by potential new members of staff who are very interested in particular things that we're doing. I mean, clearly winning the awards last year was a very successful year in terms of winning awards, so that helps with the profile, and it enables us to attract the very best staff. But the people come to us quite often with a specific interest. So it might be that there's the research side of it, or the policy side of it that people come to us for. But also we have found that, and we're quite conscious that we don't want particularly younger architects to be pigeonholed, and so we need to give everybody experience across the full sort of spectrum of work, both in terms of the types of projects and also different stages. But there are clearly individuals that have a particular aptitude for certain things. So I've been working very close. One other problem with that is that we do seem to end up as a feeder for the public sector. So we very, very rarely lose staff to go to work for other architects. They almost always go to work for public sector, either into government or into local government, which is quite nice in a way, because we're sort of sending them out into the world and they're going off and doing fantastic things. But we do seem to be sort of a bit of a feeder for the public sector. But give you an example, there's a young architect I've been working with over the last 6 months or so on the policy work, called Anna Crew, and she's been absolutely amazing and has just an incredible aptitude for this work. And she worked with me on the AI, the small sites AI project that we did for MHLG, and she led on the small sites design code that we just written for the next London plan. She's now gone to work for Ealing Council as their small sites officer. So So it's nice to see people going off and doing these
She may become a client, of course.
Well, she may become a client, of course. Yes, yes, exactly. So there's other benefits to that as well, which wouldn't be the case if they were going off to work for other architects.
Yeah.
It's a difficult balance, isn't it? That the investment that you make in the team and the profile, because you do so much work that gives you that profile. I suppose that is the downside and the risk of
It is, yeah, but I'm quite comfortable with that. I
Yeah.
think we need to see architecture in a slightly different way. What's interesting is that knowing a lot of other practices like us and a similar size, there is a healthy competitiveness, but also a mutual recognition about how
Yes.
difficult it is. And as you know, I set up the London Practice Forum nearly 8 years ago. And that was because it felt to me that there wasn't a network that existed for similar minded practices to talk to one another about the kind of issues that they're facing. And we are all competing against each other on various things, but you don't mind, I think, losing out to other good practices. I mean, that's fine. It's just the nature of what we do. But I do think that the whole profession needs to be a bit more collaborative, and I'm not sure that the current model of architectural practice is sustainable, particularly in an economic situation we're in at the moment.
Say more.
Well, I think we need to be a bit more fluid, actually, and certainly the challenge that we're finding, and I know a lot of other practices like us are finding, is that as you start to scale up and as you start to get access to bigger projects and you get a bigger profile, there's, I think, a different large projects are not few and far between, but they come less regularly. And so we don't want to be in a position where we're sort of growing and shrinking all the time, because that's difficult. And so one of the things that the London Practice Forum has is this secondment program. So if because practice is lumpy, right? I mean, people go through periods of having loads of work or not of work, and you don't want to hire a fire in order to even out those lumps. And so the London Practice Forum has a mechanism where practices can lend out staff to one another in order to help with that. But the overheads for practices become so significant. I mean, professional indemnity insurance is horrendous, and the cost of renting an office is horrendous. And even a practice of our size, has to bring in sort of well into the six figures per each month to keep going. And in the current climate, I don't feel like that's sustainable. There's a diminishing amount of work out there, and an increasing number of practices all competing for it. And I don't see how that is a sustainable model for the future. And actually, we need to be a bit more agile, a bit more nimble, and to be able to adapt to those circumstances and to the to the constant churn in projects, because particularly in the political climate we're in, that's proven very difficult, because projects are stopping and starting or being paused and all that sort of stuff. So there's I think there's a different model that we need to adopt. I'm not quite sure what it is, but it's worthy of sort of.
There goes my next question then.
Oh well, okay. Yes. I don't know. I think there are maybe ways that and I'm also mindful that we don't want to end up in the gig economy where people are just because people do younger staff in particular, want stability and deserve stability. But I do think a model for where practices can be more adaptable to changing circumstances is probably healthier.
How do clients react to the secondment? Is it visible to clients?
No, it's not. It's not visible. It's not something that we hide or conceal.
No.
But I don't know that we do. It's not something that I think is spoken about publicly, but only because I think the clients come to us because of the practice, and clearly there's individuals within it that they like and they want to work with. But I don't think that they're the secondments tend to happen with part twos and architects.
Right. Okay.
Rarely, I mean, you wouldn't second a director or associate director or
No.
something.
No.
So I think it's probably easier to justify to clients.
And secondment, of course, means that people, and as you say, it's usually the younger people or people at an earlier stage of their career, get to experience the culture of different practices. So if you've got a very strong culture and then they go to, well, I suppose in the London Practice Forum, there are similarities in culture as well. There may be differences in the way that that's expressed, but you're broadly similar.
I think that's exactly right. And we're quite careful to maintain that, because we want to know that young architects going on to comment from one practice to another will be working on similar types of work, similarly interesting types.
And will they be led in similar ways, though? Will they?
They might. They might not be. They might. I mean, all the practices have different setups and ranges of work. We do all the London Practice members do sign up to a charter which describes or sets out the ways in which they're expected to behave. So there is we know at least they have a degree of compatibility with one another, and nothing is imposed on staff. So it's not mandatory that people get seconded across. It's their choice if they want to accept it or not. But as you say, it's a really interesting way of getting exposure to another practice and seeing what, and perhaps filling a gap in your experience that you haven't got in the practice that you're currently in.
So it should help with retention as well.
It
Obviously
should help
helps with
retention. Yes,
retention.
exactly.
But
Yes.
yeah. I'm just thinking, Russell, this sort of big thinking, one of the big issues that we have at the moment is around AI, which is galloping along and affecting lots of different areas of our lives and work. But lots of people still, to me, seem like they're in the weeds of it. So talking about AI slop on LinkedIn or social media, or whether or not it can do minor admin type things. But as a bigger thinker, I just wonder how you see the opportunities maybe in architecture.
Nice, simple question there.
Nice simple question. Well, actually, I mean, AI has been transformative for us as a practice.
Right.
And we were lucky enough to win a large grant from MHCLG last year, £100,000 grant, to develop a geospatial AI tool which finds small sites. So the idea is that you feed it, you train it to look for certain characteristics within mapping data, and then you can build up a model which identifies where you might find small sites of different types in different boroughs. Now, this was based on a piece of research that, again, it was one of the things I started in my own time and developed proof of concept, and then we were able to secure the funding from MHCLG as part of the PropTech funding round, and that enabled us to invest significant resources in developing the tool, which we have now used to help the GLA with the evidence base for the London Plan small sites targets. I think what was interesting about that piece of work is that, for me, it came out of a realization when I was at the London Plan examination in public back in 2020 or whenever it was, that the GLA, I think, would admit that their evidence base for the small sites policies were not robust enough, because the data didn't really exist. And it occurred to me, well, look, I know a little bit about small site policy. I know a little bit about programming. Can I build a tool that tries to find all of these sites? Because what happened was the boroughs were saying, well, we don't think we've got 20,000 sites in Havering for what you think you think we can deliver. Well, how do they know that? And so I then used this. I developed this sort of AI to try and solve that problem, and I was surprised at how well it worked. And then so we got this funding to develop it. The point I'm trying to make is AI, I think, has a massive opportunity, but it should be solutions focused.
Right.
The point you make about slop images and terrible writing on LinkedIn is because people are flailing around trying to find a solution to solve using these powerful new tools they've got at their disposal. Actually, if you think about what problem am I trying to solve, and then but I can deploy AI to solve that, that's a much more powerful use case. And that's what we've done. We've built a whole series of tools internally. I mean, like the PropTech work, we were using pattern recognition to assess the sites. We use generative AI to produce the software stack. and do the analysis. And so all these tools that we've got available are really focused on what outcome we're trying to get to. And that, in that case, is incredibly powerful. But if you're just using it to write, health and safety policy or to generate images for LinkedIn, I think that's a complete waste.
Yeah.
Yeah, good answer. Well, we're coming to an end of our time with you, Russell, and like to end on a bit of a high. And I noticed that in your values, you say creating joy is one of your values, and joy has been on my mind quite a bit lately because we're not living in a particularly joyous time in the history of the planet or anything really. And I just wondered where you create the joy within the practice, how you create the joy within the practice, and how much at the forefront of what you do that is.
Yeah, that's one of our values, but we are committed to it, and I think it's it's quite hard to define, isn't it? It's a bit like beauty, right? It means something different to
Yeah.
different people, but
Yeah.
I think it is hard. I mean, the world is a dark place at the moment, and it's difficult creating buildings that are any good. I mean, all the challenges that we face around viability and legislation and all that stuff is really difficult. But I think joy, the feeling of joy is something that you just know you have, right? So you see a moment in the building in the high street, or you walk into a building and you feel uplifted by it, and that's what we should be doing. And I don't think that doesn't cost more. It doesn't. It's not the same thing as beauty, because different people have different reactions to these things. But it's a feeling about a place that makes it special, that you remember and you feel uplifted by it. And that's something I think is really important to us. We have to find those moments. And it might be little things. It might be just individual moments within, I don't know, on a staircase, that you've got an opportunity to sit in a window and look out at a lovely view, or a tree or something. And these things are not, it's not grandiose. It's not sort of big gestures. It's just the little everyday moments that we all know and probably just sort of think about briefly and then move on. But actually shape our picture of the world and how we feel about the world that we're in. And we need those chinks of light at the moment, don't we? I mean, it's really
We really do. We need to all dwell in a place of joy a little bit more often, even if it's just for a small moment in a small place.
Yeah,
Thank
I like
you
that.
very much.
Chinks of light.
Yeah.
Okay, thanks very much, Russell. I think we got through quite a lot there in that half an hour. Thanks very much for joining us. Thanks to everyone out there for listening. Yeah, and see you soon.
Thank you.
Yeah. Bye.